There's something strange about the 1980s. It was one of the loudest, most colorful decades in pop music history, and yet a surprising number of songs that were absolutely everywhere back then have all but vanished. No oldies stations, no commercials, no movies dusting them off for a nostalgia moment. They just disappeared. These are 15 songs from the 1980s that once ruled the charts, now completely forgotten. Number 15, Funky Town by Lips Inc. If you were alive in 1980, you heard this song. Funky Town by the Minneapolis duo Lips Inc. hit number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in May of 1980, where it stayed for 4 weeks. It reached the top spot in over 28 countries, making it one of the most successful singles of that year. The song was the work of Steven Greenberg, who wrote, produced, and played most of the instruments on the track. Lead vocals were handled by Cynthia Johnson, whose bright, urgent delivery was perfectly suited to the song's mechanical groove. The sound was rooted in disco, but it arrived right at the moment when synthesizers were beginning to reshape everything about pop music. That combination, funky but electronic, danceable but forward-looking, helped it land across radio formats that rarely agreed on anything. Lips Incorporated had formed only the year before, in 1979, in Minneapolis. Funky Town was released on their debut album, Mouth to Mouth, and it was their first single to receive any significant attention. Disco had just taken a very public beating. The backlash was real and loud. But Funky Town slipped past all of that and thrived anyway. Outside the United States, the single charted at number 2 in the United Kingdom, and it dominated charts across Europe, Australia, and Canada. Lips Inc. never came close to replicating that success. Their follow-up work made little impression on charts anywhere, and the duo gradually faded from view. What remains is that 4-minute blast of synthesized funk from the very first year of the decade, a chart topper that most of the world has quietly forgotten. Number 14, Tainted Love by Soft Cell. Tainted Love. When Tainted Love arrived in 1981, it sounded like nothing else on the radio. Soft Cell was a British duo, vocalist Mark Almond and instrumentalist David Ball, and their stripped-down, synthesizer-driven version of an obscure 1964 soul song by Gloria Jones became one of the defining singles of the early 80s. In the United Kingdom, Tainted Love went to number 1 on the singles chart in September 1981, holding for 2 weeks. It was the best-selling single in the UK for all of 1981, moving over 1 million copies, and reached number 1 in countries including Australia, Belgium, Canada, and Germany. The US story was different and remarkable. The song entered the Billboard Hot 100 in January 1982, fell to number 100, then climbed again over many months, eventually peaking at number 8 in July 1982. What happened next set a record. Tainted Love spent 43 consecutive weeks on the Hot 100, a Guinness certified record for the longest uninterrupted run on that chart at the time. Tainted Love. The song itself was not a Soft Cell original. Gloria Jones had first recorded it in 1964, though her version never charted. Soft Cell discovered it through the Northern Soul scene in England, slowed the tempo, stripped out the horns, and rebuilt it around synthesizers and Mark Almond's weary delivery. Their record label told them it would be their last release on the imprint if it didn't sell. It sold. Younger generations who know Tainted Love often know it through Marilyn Manson's 2001 cover or from film and television placements, without necessarily connecting it to Soft Cell at all. the act behind one of the most chart-enduring singles of the decade has largely slipped from the mainstream conversation.
Tainted Love.
Number 13, Mickey by Tony Basil. Before Mickey exploded, Tony Basil had spent years working behind the scenes as a choreographer. She had danced in films, worked on television productions, and collaborated with some of the most recognizable names in entertainment. When she recorded Mickey in 1981, she was already 38 years old, practically unheard of for a debut pop single. Mickey was not an original composition. It was a reworked version of a 1979 song called Kitty, originally recorded by the British group Racy. Basil changed the gender of the subject and retooled the arrangement, and the result, cheerleader chants, hand claps, call and response hooks, felt completely new. The music video, which featured Basil performing with a full cheerleading squad, became one of the most replayed clips in early MTV history. The song reached number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in January 1983, 2 years after its original release in 1981, largely because MTV had been giving the video heavy rotation in the months between. It was an unusual trajectory, a slow-building, video-driven climb that reflected how much the music landscape had already changed since the network launched in August 1981. Tony Basil never had another major chart hit in the United States, and by the mid-1980s, she had largely returned to work as a choreographer and director. Mickey stayed in circulation through the decade, at sporting events, at parties, but both the song and its creator faded from the kind of memory that keeps an artist's name alive. Today, the song still surfaces occasionally. The woman behind it rarely does. Number 12, Come On Eileen by Dexys Midnight Runners. Few songs defined a moment the way Come On Eileen did in 1982 and 1983. The British group Dexys Midnight Runners, led by Kevin Rowland, built the song around Celtic folk instruments, fiddles, banjo, accordion, at a time when the pop charts were dominated by synthesizers. The result was unlike anything else on the radio. Released in the UK in 1982, Come On Eileen went to number 1 on the British singles chart and became the best-selling single in the UK for that year. It then crossed to the United States, reaching number 1 on the Billboard Hot 100 in April 1983. VH1 later ranked it as the top one-hit wonder of the 1980s, though the band had additional hits in the UK. Kevin Rowland confirmed in interviews that Eileen was not a real person. The name was chosen for its sound, representing something about youthful hope and escape. Despite the 2 number 1 positions and the transatlantic success, Dexys Midnight Runners never came close to replicating that level of attention in the United States. The band went through lineup changes and a rocky period in the years that followed. Rowland eventually revived the Dexys name for later projects, but in the American popular imagination, they remain almost entirely defined by those fiddles and that chorus. And even those are frequently recognized without the band's name attached to them. Number 11, Too Shy by Kajagoogoo. Kajagoogoo was a British pop group from Leighton Buzzard, Bedfordshire, and Too Shy was their first single, released in January 1983. The song was produced by Nick Rhodes of Duran Duran and Colin Thurston, who had also produced Duran Duran's first 2 albums. The result was slick, polished synth pop with a distinctive slap bass line played by band member Nick Beggs. and a light, airy vocal from lead singer Limahl, whose real name was Christopher Hamill. Too Shy reached number 1 on the UK singles chart in February 1983, holding the position for 2 weeks. It also went to number 1 in Germany, Belgium, and Ireland, and reached the top 5 in France, Switzerland, Austria, the Netherlands, and Japan. In the United States, aided by heavy rotation on MTV, it peaked at number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the summer of 1983. The band's rise and collapse were almost simultaneous. Within months of their debut success, the other members fired Limahl, citing creative differences. Beggs took over as lead vocalist, and the group released 2 more albums before breaking up in 1986. Limahl went on to record the theme for the 1984 film The Neverending Story, but neither he nor the remaining Kajagoogoo members ever came close to the reach of that first single. Today, Too Shy turns up at retro nights, but the name Kajagoogoo rarely does, not without a moment of explanation required. Number 10, I Ran So Far Away by A Flock of Seagulls. A Flock of Seagulls was a British new wave band formed in Liverpool in 1979, and I Ran So Far Away was the single that introduced them to a global audience. Released in 1982 from their self-titled debut album, the song reached number 9 on the US Billboard Hot 100, a notable achievement for a British new wave act at the time. The band were arguably as famous for their appearance as for their music. Lead singer Mike Score wore his hair in an extravagant swept-forward style that became cultural shorthand for the eccentricities of early 80s pop fashion. That look, paired with heavy MTV rotation, gave A Flock of Seagulls an immediate visual identity. Follow-up singles performed unevenly. Wishing, If I Had a Photograph of You, reached the top 20 in the UK, but made a modest showing in the US. And by the mid-1980s, the group's commercial momentum had largely run out. Today, A Flock of Seagulls is remembered primarily in 2 ways: as a trivia answer and as a punchline for the hairstyle. The song tends to get lost behind both. Number 9, 99 Luftballons by Nena.
You and I in a little toy shop by a
In 1983, a West German rock band named Nena released 99 Luftballons, a song sung entirely in German about the accidental triggering of a nuclear war by a cluster of balloons drifting into restricted airspace. It became one of the most unlikely international hits of the entire decade. The concept for the song came from the band's guitarist, Carlo Carges, who attended a Rolling Stones concert in West Berlin in June 1982.
99 red balloons floating in the summer.
He watched as balloons were released into the crowd, drifting toward the horizon, and the image stayed with him. The idea of those balloons being mistaken for something threatening and the catastrophic misunderstanding that might follow became the basis for the lyric. In the United States, the original German-language recording peaked at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 in 1984, held from the top spot by Van Halen's Jump.
Focusing it on the sky for 99 red balloons.
American and Australian audiences specifically preferred the German version over the English translation, 99 Red Balloons. The single was certified gold in the United States. Nena continued as a major recording artist in Germany, where she remains a significant figure to this day. But outside Germany, she never had another international hit of comparable scale. 99 Luftballons surfaces occasionally in film soundtracks and retro playlists, but the name Nena draws very little recognition among listeners who weren't adults in 1984. Number 8, Puttin' on the Ritz by Taco.
If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go?
Taco Akerse was born in Jakarta, Indonesia, to Dutch parents, raised across multiple countries, and trained as an actor and dancer in Hamburg, Germany. In 1982, he recorded a synth-pop version of Puttin' on the Ritz, a song originally written by Irving Berlin in 1929, for his debut album, After 8. The music video aired frequently on MTV and became central to the song's American success. Taco performed in full formal attire, surrounded by dancers and theatrical staging that deliberately evoked old Hollywood glamour.
In the mix, putting on the Ritz.
By September 1983, the song had climbed to number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100. It also reached number 1 in Sweden and New Zealand, and entered the top 5 in Canada, Norway, and Austria. The single sold over 1 million copies in the United States alone, earning a gold certification from the RIAA, one unusual footnote to its success. Because Puttin' on the Ritz was written by Irving Berlin, the song's chart performance made Berlin, then 95 years old, the oldest living songwriter ever to have a composition enter the American top 10.
If you're blue and you don't know where to go to, why don't you go where?
Berlin died in 1989 at the age of 101. Taco never had another hit in the United States. His follow-up album received little attention, and he eventually returned to focus on the German and European markets. The song remains his sole contribution to American chart history, an impeccably performed record that made it all the way to number 4, and then slipped almost entirely out of the public memory.
Putting it on, putting it on, putting it on.
Number 7, I Melt With You by Modern English. Modern English was a post-punk band from Colchester, Essex in England. They formed in 1979, signed to the British independent label 4AD, and were building a reputation for darker, more abrasive music when they recorded I Melt With You for their second album, After the Snow, in 1982. According to guitarist Gary McDowell, the song came together in the band's rehearsal space in London. Producer Hugh Jones pushed the band toward a more accessible sound than they had previously recorded, encouraging vocalist Robbie Gray to sing softly rather than shout.
I'll stop the world and melt with you.
The result was a departure from their earlier work, cleaner, warmer, and built around a melody that would prove surprisingly durable. The song did not chart significantly in the United Kingdom upon release, but in the United States it found its audience through MTV, which placed the video in heavy rotation in early 1983. It peaked at number 7 on the Billboard Mainstream Rock chart that year and reached number 78 on the main Hot 100, modest by top 40 standards, but enough to generate significant radio play and club exposure across the country.
I'll stop the world and melt with you.
It also appeared in the 1983 film Valley Girl, which introduced it to an audience well beyond the band's existing fan base. Modern English received a Lifetime Achievement Award from BMI in 2017, recognizing the song's longevity on American radio. A re-recording released in 1990 returned it briefly to the Hot 100. Despite all of that, the band itself is largely unknown to general audiences today. I Melt With You is the kind of song people recognize the moment it starts playing, without having any idea who recorded it.
I'll stop the world and melt with you.
Number 6, The Safety Dance by Men Without Hats.
'Cause your friends don't dance, and if they don't dance, well,
Men Without Hats was a Canadian synth-pop band led by singer Ivan Doroshuk. The Safety Dance was released in 1982 from their debut EP Rhythm of Youth. and it reached number 3 on the Billboard Hot 100 in the United States in 1983. A remarkable position for a Canadian new wave act at the time.
We can dance, everything's out of control.
The music video became one of the more memorable of the early MTV era. Shot in a rural English village, it featured Dora Shook dancing through a medieval landscape with a court jester and a woman in peasant dress. The visual approach, completely unrelated to anything in the lyrics, was bizarre enough to lodge itself firmly in the memories of anyone who saw it during regular MTV rotation.
It's safe to dance. Yes, it's safe to dance.
Dora Shook has stated that the lyric was written as a reaction to bouncers at new wave clubs who would eject dancers they felt were moving disruptively. The song, in that reading, was a response to being told how one was permitted to dance. Men Without Hats had a second US chart entry with Pop Goes the World in 1987, reaching number 20, but never came close to the reach of The Safety Dance. Today, the song and video surface regularly in retrospective coverage of early MTV, but the name Men Without Hats rarely lands without explanation. Number 5, She Blinded Me with Science by Thomas Dolby. Thomas Dolby was a British musician and producer whose work was deeply embedded in the possibilities that synthesizers and electronic music were opening up in the early 1980s. She Blinded Me with Science was released in October 1982 in the UK, but it was the American release in 1983, paired with a music video receiving heavy MTV rotation, that made it a hit. The song peaked at number 5 on the Billboard Hot 100 in May 1983. In Canada, it reached number 1 on the RPM chart. In Dolby's native United Kingdom, however, it barely cracked the top 50, peaking at number 49, a disparity that underscored how differently American and British audiences received his work. The video was conceived before the song was written. Dolby had the idea for a short film set in a home for deranged scientists and wrote the song specifically to accompany that visual concept. He then directed the video himself. British scientist and television presenter Magnus Pyke appeared as a character in it, delivering enthusiastic exclamations of "science" throughout, which became the song's most quotable element. VH1 ranked She Blinded Me with Science at number 20 on its list of the 100 greatest one-hit wonders. Dolby went on to a successful career as a music technologist and producer, but as a recording artist, he never approached that level of recognition in the United States again. Today, the song is occasionally recognized, but Thomas Dolby's name rarely is. Number 4, 8675309/Jenny by Tommy Tutone.
Jenny, who can I turn to?
Tommy Tutone was a rock band from San Francisco, and 8675309/Jenny was released in 1982 from their second album, Tommy Tutone 2. The song reached number 4 on the Billboard Hot 100 in April 1982, giving the band their only major American chart success.
Tried to call you before, but I lost my nerve.
The premise was simple. The narrator has found a woman's name and phone number written on a wall and documents his fixation on calling it. What made it a real-world problem was the specificity of that number. Across the United States, people at exchanges beginning with 867 began receiving calls from strangers asking for Jenny within weeks of the song's release. Some exchanges received so many calls that the number had to be retired. In the decades since, it has appeared in countless television programs, films, and commercials. Tommy Tutone never replicated that chart success. The The band's subsequent albums attracted minimal attention, and by the mid-1980s, they had largely dissolved. Outside the industry, the Tommy Two-Tone name survived almost entirely because of one phone number. Number 3, Obsession by Animotion.
Cannot sleep, I am possession.
Animotion was a Los Angeles-based synth-pop group with dual lead vocalists, Bill Wadhams and Astrid Plain, whose interplay gave their debut single an unusual dramatic intensity. Obsession was written by Holly Knight and Michael DeBar, who had originally recorded it themselves in 1983 as a duet for the film A Night in Heaven. That version went nowhere. When Animotion re-recorded it a year later for their self-titled debut album, the outcome was very different. Released in late 1984, Obsession entered the top 40 on the Billboard Hot 100 in March 1985. It peaked at number 6 in June of that year and reached number 5 on the UK singles chart. The music video, filled with theatrical costumes, swimming pools, and dramatic posturing, was tailor-made for MTV. The song became a staple of the network's rotation through the spring and summer of 1985. Beyond the charts, Obsession accumulated a remarkable number of cultural placements. It served as the theme for the Canadian television program Fashion Television from 1986 onward, appeared in Grand Theft Auto, Vice City, American Dad, and South Park, and was the opening theme for WWF's Saturday Night's Main Event from 1985 through 1988. For all of that reach, Animotion itself is largely unknown today outside of dedicated 80s music communities. The band went through significant lineup changes after Obsession, and subsequent singles performed well below that peak. Obsession is one of those records that has never stopped appearing in culture, but whose origins are almost never traced back to the people who recorded it. Number 2, Whip It by Devo.
You must whip it before the cream sets out too long. You must whip it.
Devo was an art rock band from Akron, Ohio, whose entire creative identity was built around a particular theory, that human culture was in a state of devolution rather than progress. That idea informed everything: their visuals, their lyrics, their costumes, and a sound that borrowed from punk, new wave, and electronic music without belonging completely to any of them.
Now whip it into shape. Shape it up.
Whip It was released in 1980 from the album Freedom of Choice, and it reached number 14 on the Billboard Hot 100, the band's highest American chart position. The music video, featuring the band in energy dome hats whipping the clothing off a woman at a ranch, was provocative enough to be banned by some television outlets, which only increased its visibility on others. MTV played it frequently in the network's early months. Devo had formed in the early 1970s and had been building an audience for years before Whip It broke into the mainstream.
Whip it good. I say whip it.
They had a devoted following in the art, rock, and punk communities, and several earlier singles had charted modestly, but nothing they recorded before or after connected with a general American audience the way Whip It did in 1980. The band continued recording and touring well into subsequent decades, developing a cult audience that stayed loyal long after their commercial moment had passed. But for most casual listeners, Whip It exists as a punchline, a quirky artifact from the start of the decade, rather than the work of a band with a coherent, creative philosophy behind it.
It's not too late to whip it. Whip it good.
Number 1, The Lover in Me by Sheena Easton. Sheena Easton was a Scottish singer who had already had a remarkable run of success by 1988. She had reached number 1 in the United States with Morning Train 9 to 5 in 1981, sung the Bond theme For Your Eyes Only, which earned an Academy Award nomination, and collaborated with Prince. The Lover in Me was the lead single from her 9th studio album of the same name, released on MCA Records in November 1988.
Everlasting love is what you waited for.
Written and produced by Babyface, L.A. Reid, and Daryl Simmons, it marked a clear shift toward urban contemporary R&B, away from the adult pop she had become associated with. It was a commercially decisive move. The Lover in Me peaked at number 2 on the Billboard Hot 100 in early 1989, reached number 5 on the Hot R&B chart, and hit number 1 on the Billboard Dance Singles Sales chart. In the United Kingdom, it was her first top 20 hit in 7 years, and the album was certified gold by the RIAA.
But I gotta know that you're there to receive.
Within a few years, Easton had stepped back from active recording. She never had another major U.S. hit. The song that marked her final large-scale commercial moment is rarely cited today. A late-decade success that arrived just as the decade itself was closing.
Let's talk about the lover, baby.
The 1980s produced more chart hits than any single playlist could contain, and most of them have been quietly set aside. Some of these songs were number 1s, some set records, some dominated radio for months before fading so completely that even the people who heard them every day have trouble placing a name to them now. If any of these brought something back for you, a memory, a radio station, a particular afternoon, let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this video, please give it a like and subscribe. There's plenty more where this came from,